It's another beautiful day, and you are listening to the Mercy Cast, where we are learning the art of compassion through life's adversity. I am still Raleigh Sadler, your host. So many of these episodes that we do, we're talking about how people ended up at what they're doing, kind of their origin story. And oftentimes, most of our origin stories, whether it be just pick the superhero, Spider-Man, Superman. There's always something that's happening, right? Everyone's origin story is often filled with pain. But what we have learned and what we're learning is that oftentimes pain points to our purpose. And honestly, my guests today are great. And what I love about my guests is their story led them to intersect with the stories of others. I am with Andrea and Haril Kazindra, the co-founders and co-CEOs of Musana. You see, Andrea and Haril started Musana by taking on legal guardianship of 80 children in Uganda. If you're anything like me, I want to hear the story. So, Andrea and Haril, welcome to the Mercy Cast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for having us. We are so glad to be here and to share with so many other people out there.
You are the first, Haril, to ever tell me, and I think you're right, that Denver is the most beautiful place in America. Thank you for that. What you all didn't hear was, as we were preparing for this, I may have disrespected Denver, and I was thoroughly rebuked by Haril. And I am going to give it another try. So, but one thing Haril also told me is...
I give you a lot of grace on that.
Haril also told me that Uganda is a beautiful place. And this excites me because I've never been to Africa and it's a place I want to go. And so I want to know more. What led you to take legal guardianship of 80 children in Uganda? There's got to be a story there.
Yeah, there's definitely a story. And I'll start by sharing a little bit about myself. I grew up in Denver, Colorado.
I love Denver, Colorado. It's my favorite.
I grew up in a Christian home, and my whole life was told to be the hands and feet of Jesus, right? And kind of went through life and ended up joining the business school at University of Colorado and had this plan of opening a coffee shop. Being in the business school, I was so conflicted, right? Because I'm learning about profit maximization. Basically, how do we get more wealthy and accumulate more, and just this whole materialistic world.
Yeah.
I struggled to understand how I could use business to also serve God and serve people. Learning about microfinance, which is giving small business loans to the poorest people in the world that can lift themselves up out of poverty. And I got so excited and learned everything I could about it and applied for an internship in Uganda. So between my sophomore and junior year, I was 20 years old, got on a plane with my sister and a friend, and ended up in Iganga, Uganda, a rural community. And shortly after we got there, I was placed in an orphanage where 160 kids were living, and literally the worst conditions you could ever imagine, right? I mean, sleeping on dirt floors, starving. The compound that they lived in was the community trash dump. The boys were stealing food to survive. The girls were selling themselves to men to get something to eat. It was an incredibly broken place, right? And of course, I had grown up being told that Jesus loved these children, and it was hard for me to think about leaving them. In that process, basically uncovered a lot of corruption and misuse of resources, and learned that these kids were being kept in these conditions for a reason, to attract foreigners to come and donate, and then the money would be misused. I ended up calling my parents and telling them I can't go home. I have to stay and try to close this orphanage and move the kids to a safe place. I met this man next to me, and he was a young entrepreneur living across the street and knew how to manage everything. I mean, right, I'm a 20-year-old white girl trying to close this orphanage and take these kids. Had no idea what I was doing. So Haril jumped in and started to help, and it was crazy, crazy process. I mean, we were getting death threats from the people that because we were exposing all these lies and all this deceit. And so people did not like that because these kids were their income, right? And we were trying to say, no, this isn't right. We can take them, we can give them a better life. September 16th, 2008, we had convinced the government to give us 80 of the 160 kids. And September 16th, 2008, we moved 80 kids into what we called Musana Children's Home and became legal guardians. And then from there, uncovered that all these kids had parents. And so began this process of re-establishing them with their families and started to look at how do we address the root causes of poverty instead of just the symptoms. And we can share more about that. But that's the origin story of Musana.
Thank you so much for sharing your origin story with me, because I think it's so important to know how we arrive at what we're doing and how we become passionate about what we become passionate about. In your story, there's so many things that dovetail with what we talk about every week. And I love how you went over there, you met her in Uganda, which is one of the most beautiful places on the planet, apparently, and I can't wait to see it. What I love is you guys met as you were caring for vulnerable populations, as you were caring for these kids who are often looked over. Was this like a love at first sight thing, or did you guys just kind of connect and you're like, we're on the same page?
Yeah. So
You've never done this on a podcast.
We didn't start looking at each other in a different way after like 4 years of working together. How we get to meet with Andrea, she was hosted just across the street from where I was staying when she first got to Uganda. And that's how we got to know each other. I got to learn about her internship with microfinance, but also volunteering at this broken orphanage where we ended rescuing the 80s, kids and bringing them to Musana. So how I get involved, she invited me to the orphanage to see the conditions and how everything was going there. I was really touched with her compassion, thinking how this disturbing situation that she has so much compassion about than so many other people within our community that are not really having compassion and overlooking this issue. And actually learning that so many other people and other leaders wanted these conditions to stay. There was a reason why they wanted to keep these kids in such vulnerable conditions, actually being abused, because it was a target for aid where people would come, feel compassionate, give donations, give money, and it's misused. The kids don't benefit anything, and this stays the same way. That's why in her giving you the story, she was mentioning there were threats, because in the process of rescuing them from this place, there were a lot of threats. We were young, we were just turning 21 years old, and we were trying to challenge the situation and saying, this is not okay. We cannot walk away from these kids. They deserve better. And that's how we end up with these children and starting Musana Children's Home. But the story gets interesting because when we got this home, as we celebrated and thanked God for having them in a safe place, them having a bed for the first time, a blanket and a pillow for the first time, some a toothbrush for the first time, and a decent meal, we got to really celebrate. But also we got to learn that something was missing in their story. Like most especially, where do they come from? So we went to a journey of trying to find out where these kids come from. And we found out that more than 80% of the kids had a living parent. And this was very shocking, taking us into another journey of why is this happening? Why are parents giving up their children to a broken system to be abused? Why is that? And that's when we uncovered really the real problem of charity within our communities and poor communities. It really drove us to a different journey, and we rethought what Musana should look like. We went into a journey like we're not going to just focus on helping the children, but we are going to focus on transforming the whole community. That's the challenge we had to go into. It wasn't at the first sight. It was, friendship that was built into love for each other, and God's timing was the best in all of it.
What I love about your story, not only of what you're doing, but how you both connected, is that there is mutual passion. You care for people, you care for these children, and you've come together to do that. And you both notice things that other people don't notice. You've touched on toxic charity, the need for empowerment, reunification, and connecting children back with their families of origin. A lot of people, especially well meaning Christians, don't understand that there is a lot of orphanage trafficking that happens around the world on a daily basis. Kids are brought in to bring tourists, in a sense, who have big hearts and big wallets and want to do something, but the only way they know how to help is monetarily. And then there are people who are taking advantage of these children, keeping them in squalid conditions and situations that aren't good for them. And they're profiting, but the kids aren't seeing any of that. When we think of human trafficking, we think of sex trafficking, labor trafficking, even domestic servitude. And we've actually, on the MercyCast, had an episode where we talked about that, where I sat with Ann Basham, and she shared with us why she is so passionate about seeing this end. Hearing your passion, I really admire that, because this is something that many people miss. But one thing, Haril, when you were talking, I noticed you are pointing to empowering these kids and connecting them with those safe people in their lives. How did that become a thing for you? How did you learn that empowerment is the way to care for our most vulnerable neighbors?
That's a very good question. I think the experience and the passion and the asking questions is really what happened. Looking at how I grew up being challenged with life personally. At a very early age, growing up in a polygamous family, very many kids my dad had, and he could not provide for all of us. I was really challenged growing up and got some self-empowerment to see that I can be self-reliant and perhaps support the people within my family. And growing up like that and finding out that parents were giving up their responsibilities to these children was very shocking to me personally. I felt it's not right, being that I was so empowered. I believed in self-reliancy. I believed in independency. So it drove us into a journey of, why can't we really create a self-reliant community? Why can't we empower these communities to be self-reliant, to revive their dignity and value? Because I'm a strong believer that the only way we can feel value or dignity if when we have a purpose to live. But when we feel we are hopeless, no purpose of living, there is lost dignity and value. So with that, wanting that for my community, for our people, really drove us to change what Musana should look at, so that we are not waiting for anyone miles away to come and be our savior and support. We can walk the journey together, but we cannot live like that forever.
Thank you for sharing your story. This was very personal to both of you, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah.
And why self-reliance? Because I agree with you. I agree with every word you just said, especially about not waiting for someone outside to come and save us, not waiting for some hero to come and fix our problem. But you're teaching people right there that they can make strides. Their actions matter. Their agency is important. Why self-reliance and not just more dependence on money from other countries?
Yeah, it's not sustainable. I remember growing up waiting for my parents to provide for me. It wasn't going to work because they could not do it. At a very early age, I had to figure out how to fish for myself, how to work hard. If it wasn't because of that, I would not be where I am today. I believe that it's not very sustainable to be dependent, and it kills you. It kills your value. It kills your dignity. It kills your worth. It cripples your creativity, your thinking. The list goes on and on. We feel that poor communities can only change if they are empowered to be self-reliant. This is when they become more creative because they know their problems best. They know how to solve their problems. And what they choose as a solution is more sustainable and long-lasting than someone coming from outside to tell them what to do or to support them. It has never been sustainable or long-lasting when it's coming from outside. Something can grow and become, more meaningful if it's coming from within, most especially within ourselves or within the communities themselves. Even when we're talking about believing in something, someone doesn't make you believe in something. You have to believe in it yourself. I think that's one of the reasons why.
I think we have a very big role to play in terms of being on the donor side because we've created the dependency, right? We have created this idea that countries like Uganda need us, right? That the continent of Africa needs us.
Right.
And all of these charitable programs that we do thinking that we're helping, we're not willing to look at how they've just created more harm, right? $1.2 trillion of aid has gone to Africa in 30 years, right? People are generous. People are well-intentioned. People want to help. But the approaches that we're using, if they don't change, things will not get better. Charity has never developed any country. What has developed a country is investment, enterprise, industry, building, create job creation, right? We have this idea as donors, we want to sponsor a child. Well, why not invest in a business that is going to give the parents a job, an income, so that they can support their children on their own? And that is what is going to create true dignity, because I do think that dignity has been stripped in so many of these communities by us, the well-meaning Westerners that want to help, but are just, we've created a paternalistic mindset, and that we have to break that.
Exactly. And I think we've all heard of companies like Tom's Shoes. Tom's comes to mind because everyone got excited when they came out. The 1-for-1 model. You buy one pair of shoes, they give a pair of shoes. But over time, something started to come out that they were basically putting these shoes into these villages in Africa, but elsewhere. And there was talk that it was putting people out of business because the materials were coming from other places. And now there's just this influx of shoes and it's creating dependency to the point where Tom's was really impacted. Since then, they have shifted their model to donate a third of their profits to grassroots campaigns to people who are doing the work, who are being self-reliant. And I think as a culture, that's something we have to shift from, because we love the fact that we can make choices for ourselves that benefit others. But sometimes those don't benefit others the way they promise that they'll benefit others. And I found that things are just a tiny bit more complicated. And so I love how you are coming at it from, we want to create an atmosphere of empowerment for people. We want to help people dig into who they are and discover that they may be the hero that God's calling. You know, it's not, hey, be dependent on us. And so what are some stories, Andrea, that really have captivated you in your work where you're like, man, that person has really leaned into their own agency. That person has made choices that's not only changing their lives, but it's changing their community.
There are so many stories. What has been so beautiful is Musana has become a place where there is a DNA in the community of Musana. Today, Musana has 700 Ugandan employees. Every one of them has this belief that they are the change agents in their community. They will not wait for handouts. They will not wait for people to come and do it for them. They are working every day, running efficient and effective businesses, right? Schools, hospitals, hotels, restaurants that are generating income, profiting, and supporting the most vulnerable people. And this mentality exists across the board. So you talk about, I could talk about 700 employees of Musana, each one of them with this unique, powerful story of how they have become their own, they are transforming their own communities. They've transformed their own lives. I love the story of Lydia, a woman who came to Musana really early on when we were just a children's home. Lydia came to Musana. I'll never forget the day she walked in the gate, literally skin and bone, so thin. She had a 4-year-old little girl walking beside her and a baby in her arms. She handed me this dying baby and said, I am dying. I can't take my kids. I don't have a husband. I have no job. Please take my children. I cannot take care of them anymore. At that point, we had a children's home and we could have taken the children, right? Instead, we said, no, come with the children. We got her the health care she needed. We got her baby the healthcare that she needed. And Lydia was trained in tailoring and became an amazing tailor. And today she actually works in one of our schools as a cleaner because she's passionate about making a beautiful space for the children. Both of her daughters are in school at Musana doing so well. She's earning an income, supporting herself, supporting her children. And she's an employee of Musana. So we get to see her all the time at staff parties and in staff meetings. And I am not even kidding you. The joy she exudes is so beautiful and empowering. The dignity she has because she can support herself and support her kids. Such a beautiful picture, I think. There are thousands of stories like that, but that one means a lot to me.
Yeah, I can hear that in your voice as you share it. Like, that's so amazing because you didn't try to fix her. You just walked with her and you provided a safe space for her to heal, to grow. That's beautiful because I think it's very easy for us to be almost transactional in how we care for people. We want to just do something fast that gets measurable results and be able to tell people, this is what we're doing. And maybe that's not all of us, but sometimes we all fall into that trap. But what you're doing is so incredibly relational. Tell me a little bit more about what you all are doing on a daily basis. I know I want to know, and I know our listeners want to know as well.
Andrea says you go when we talk about what we do on a daily basis. Primarily, we oversee this beautiful vision and mission that every day keeps going. We keep impacting and transforming lives in so many ways. To break down the operational bit of it about Musana, so what we are doing, we are a holistic organization where we're building schools, hospitals, other businesses like hotels and restaurants and training centers. It's a big operation. We have 19 social enterprises that we oversee that are operational and running. We have educated almost 9,000 kids through our schools. Our hospitals are seeing, right now, they have seen more than 300,000 patient visits. We have trained over 1,000 women in business training skills that are now providing for themselves. And we are trying to see that we can grow the model and the organization to other communities. We are replicating 6 or 7 enterprises in new communities. And our goal by 2032, we want to have 10 Musanas. So it is such a huge operation and a huge goal. Like Andrea has mentioned, in Uganda, on the local team, we have over 700 full-time staff. We have really great leaders that we work with on strategy, planning, and growing the organization, making sure that everyday activities are going on in different spaces. On this side, where we have a team here that really focuses on spreading the word about Musana, fundraising, coordinating with all our partners, at the same as UK, where we have an office there as well. So we have 3 boards that we work with in Uganda, UK, and the US here. And, these are all things that keeps us busy.
Yeah.
On top of talking to Riley here, these are our day-to-day activities. But the bigger picture is all for the big cause of Musana, to see that we can impact more lives, help another family to be self-reliant, to have the basic needs like education, healthcare, and a job that can provide for them. That's our goal every day, that one more family is important to be impacted and transformed every day. That answers to what keeps us going every day.
Well,
I have a family that we have 3 kids with us here in the US that we tend to travel with. They also keep us a bit busy.
I'm just really struck because you told me about the humble origins of Musana, how you have 2 people, one a college student on an internship, one a young entrepreneur who is passionate about the community. You're working together for 4 years. You're making connections with this passion that you have. You're drawn together. You become like this power couple who's basically saying, yeah, we're both passionate about it and we're going to do something. And now you have representation on multiple continents. You have multiple staff who are national staff. They're not people from outside. You are creating this atmosphere of empowerment, giving people the opportunity. You have this incredible vision of 10 Musanas. I love hearing that because you're replicating and scaling this model. We want to see this in multiple areas around Uganda in multiple villages. How would you define your mission?
So our vision is to break cycles of dependency, right? Or see a world free of dependency and full of dignity.
Yeah.
Our mission is building faith-driven, locally led social enterprises, so schools, hospitals, and other enterprises that transform communities. I would say our biggest vision, though, and mission is to change the way the world is tackling poverty. That is like big picture. We want to change the way the world thinks about how communities should be helped. There's too much focus on programs. There's too much focus on giving and meeting immediate needs instead of addressing the root causes. And what we've seen makes us so excited about the future of countries like Uganda and the continent of Africa. Communities can transform, be self-reliant, and have access to quality and affordable education, health, and jobs. We as donors have a role to play, but we have to let go of wanting to be the heroes and directly impacting the beneficiaries, and instead invest in these incredible local leaders that know their communities, know the solutions in their communities, and are capable of transforming their own people. It's possible. And I think that is what is driving us and motivating us. We want as many organizations and philanthropists and well-meaning Westerners that want to support people and the local people to also, like, all the mentality has to shift, right? We have to shift. So I would say we are on a mission right now to educate people on what is possible and what the local people can do when they are invested in.
And I want to circle back to this idea of holistic care that you both have mentioned. You are saying that you don't want people to just do mercy. Mercy is great, meeting that need, caring for that person, giving a cup of cool water on a hot day when they need something. That's great. That's an act of mercy. But with mercy comes justice. We need justice too. And justice addresses those systems that keep people stuck. It's those root causes. And I love how you're saying we got to be holistic. We need to address both. We're doing acts of mercy and we want people to do it. You're not out here being like, no mercy. You're not saying that, but you're saying we want justice too. And I love this focus on the vulnerabilities that make people susceptible to exploitation, because you're saying if we address these and we give people options, we give people a pathway, we allow people to choose ultimately what they want for them, but we're going to help them a little bit along the way so that they can be in a place to make the most healthy choices. When you do that, you're not just changing someone's life or allowing them to be part of their own life change. You will see change in communities. And I think that's what you're seeing. For me, if I was in a situation like that, that would keep me going. Has there ever been times for you all that you get down, you're like, oh man, this is tough. I love this mission, but do I still have it? Am I able to do it? Could you tell me a story about that and how you came through that?
Do you have any you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes things happen and you're like, well, can we handle this? Even just piggybacking on what you are talking about, mercy, we want to relook on what really mercy looks like. If you want to help, what does it look like? We're not saying this way is bad, but trying to take a relook on how we approach things. Sometimes we have to approach them with a lot of grace, with a lot of thinking. There is the easy way. It's very easy to do a handout. It's very easy. Someone is going to be happy. You give me shoes. It's immediate feedback. Thank you so much. I'm happy. Maybe they come back next time. Then there is a time where it's going to feel like, for real? Am I really big now? Shit it. And you don't see change in that regards happening. This way we do is so hard because when, I don't know if you got Andrea right, but we're changing mindset on the local side of things where the community has this mindset of reliance and dependence on aid and gifts. Also on this side of the world where people are more, quickly touched with compassion. Oh, they lack clothes, they lack shoes, and we're going to send that. They lack food, we're going to ship a container for food. and send that. It's good, but it causes some harm. And we're coming in the middle. Is this what is really needed? And that's a sacrifice. That you come in to say, okay, this worked somewhere, but right now it's not what is working. It's causing more harm than good. And that's a battle you're fighting on the ground, on the recipient and who is the giver. So there are times you feel, is this really worth it? You get challenged, resistance from the local side. You build enemies in that process. Some people attack you. Our progress, our achievements every day is our joy. Because when we see results, when we see success in the work we're doing, when we see lives being impacted, not for a short time, but for a long period of time, we start believing this is the right thing we do. But the other thing that has been good for us is trusting God in every process. If we were just trusting in our own minds and our own knowledge and thinking, we would have given up long time ago. Because we have tried that. Personally, I have tried that and I have failed really hard. Trying to think that I can handle it. My ego has grown, my pride has grown, my hunger to people has grown, and it put me in a total mess. So coming from that was coming to a thinking that I really need to trust God in every process. I really need to stop fearing the unknown, fearing the failure, and just trusting that God has it handled. And that has been a very big turning point in my life, personally, to start saying, when I have a challenge, there is much I can handle. But who do I lean to? Who is the person next to me? And where is God in this picture? And by going that way, it keeps me going every day with every challenge that comes.
I mean, yeah, we could write a book on all the challenges.
I think you should.
Yeah, we have plans to one day, but there have been so many moments where it feels like it would be so much easier to give up. I mean, and I'm being really honest, but every time you overcome a challenge like that, you realize that Musana has nothing to do with us, right? We are stewards. And I am so unbelievably positive that Musana is in God's hands. We call Musana a miracle because if you think about how it began, you think about how imperfect and broken we are. I mean, we live in an imperfect and broken world, right? And the only thing that can create something like Musana is having God's hands in it. And so it's been amazing to see how we've come through situations, how we've grown through them, how God has molded us through the challenges. And yeah, it's been a journey.
Your story resonates so deeply with me. Like I'm emotional over here because so much of what you're saying is stuff that I've experienced. This being in that middle place where you're trying to encourage people on the ground, but also trying to encourage and challenge the assumptions of the people out here who want to help. And it can be hard. There can be a lot of pressure. You talk about retaliation. You talk about enemies. And oftentimes that's not just physical. That's not just people. There's spiritual pushback. And people who aren't involved in this work do not understand that, yes, you're facing it from all sides. You said something that really just hit me right in the gut. You said this idea of we want to be reliant on God. And this is so beautiful. You're talking about teaching people self-reliance while recognizing that sometimes when we only rely on ourselves, we miss something. We can make it all about ourselves. And how do these two go together? Because you're hitting on something that I think is very important for all of us. Yes, people need to be self-reliant. But how do we also hold that truth in one hand while realizing that we are dependent? Dependency, I think, is healthy when we are dependent on God. So how do these two go together?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And physical dependency and spiritual dependency, they are different.
Mm-hmm.
And in materialistic world, in the physical needs, we need a lot of discernment from God, how we live that out. need to know that it's not the sole purpose of our being and living. God created us to be capable people, able to provide for ourselves, to live life to the fullest. He never created us to be different, that these are the privileged and these are the unprivileged. These are the people with lost hope and these are the people, God created us equal and he sees us all equal as his children. And in that way, it is our goal to see that we have that equality all over. If we can be independent here in the US and be able to provide for themselves, we should want that for others. And the best way we can work with them to be self-reliant in terms of making sure they can access the basic needs in their lives is very important. But at the end of that day, we know we are all united spiritually to one direction. We want to make sure that all our dependency in that nature, if we're to talk about dependency on God, we can depend on each other in terms of encouragement, in terms of reliance, in terms of any support we need, but we don't have to make it seem like without you, I can't exist. I have to make sure that I feel the dignity and value that is a right for humanity to have. So I think it should be our goal to bring that to people in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our families, and this is what is going to give us the full spiritual glory. I think that's the best way I can put it. I don't know if Andrea, you.
I always say one of my favorite things about Uganda and Ugandans is they are incredibly spiritual. There is a connection to God in Uganda that you just see in the way people live, the joy and the gratitude that people have in their life. They have to be dependent on God. Because they have to be dependent on God, God shows up. And they see God more clearly. Whereas here, I think it's much harder in places like the US, where life is built around comfort and convenience. And we depend on ourselves. We make sure we have our 401ks and we have our investments and we have, we create as much security as we possibly can. We're reliant on things of this world. We're not reliant on God. Right. And so we live in this constant fear of getting uncomfortable. And yet God can only show up and work when we're uncomfortable, when we allow him to. So I think, and that's when we experience that joy, when we allow God to work. And so with Musana, we've chosen to believe that God is capable of anything, but we have to be willing to take steps into the unknown. We have to be willing to get uncomfortable. We have to be willing to take risks. When people tell us what you want to do is impossible, we say, exactly, because we can't do it, but God can.
I believe when we acknowledge our own vulnerabilities, that actually qualifies us to care for our neighbors who are susceptible to exploitation, who have their own vulnerabilities, though they may be different. And the God who became vulnerable for us always shows up, right? One of the things I've just picked up from this entire conversation is it's answering a question. Who is the Savior? Because a lot of times we think it's us. So we create dependence, but it's not us. We're just along for the ride. We're just being called to a greater purpose. That is a journey you both found yourself on. You followed that passion. Andrea, you followed that passion to Uganda. Haril, you went across the street. You connected and found this mission, and you're seeing God do amazing things. You're seeing people come alongside. You're seeing people raised up in the community. You're seeing things change. And of course, there's going to be pushback. And I think that's scary, but I think you're also seeing that the results and the reward is worth way more than that temporal discomfort, that fear, that uncertainty. Andrea, could you share with me, how would you encourage our listeners as we get ready to face our weeks?
I think my greatest challenge, the way I challenge people here, is be willing to get uncomfortable. Be willing to, take risks and figure out where in my life do I need God to come and move. That means us being willing to let go of things and surrender. Where can we be more dependent on God? And that way I would challenge people. I also think in terms of rethinking philanthropy and charity, let's be more mindful about where we're giving and how we're giving. And are we creating more of a problem? Are we making a long-term impact? Could we be doing more than just meeting a daily need.
I think Andrea covered it all, but I also want to just encourage the same that, first of all, to be grateful to our listeners for all the good work they're doing in the world. I think it's really amazing. And I just want to encourage them that, God has gifted each of us very differently, really paying attention to our gifts and really assessing everything that we are doing and making sure, okay, if we're doing something to make a difference in another person's life, how is that really showing up to them? Is it that they're giving God the glory or themselves? Because it's very important. Sometimes the Bible teaches us if you give with this hand, don't let the other hand know.
Yeah.
Sometimes people tend to want to know and pay attention to that. I want to encourage people, especially on this massive cast, if they're doing anything to help out anybody, is it something that is sustainable? Is it something that lasts forever? And is it something that you have emotional attachment? So I want to encourage them that let them be mindful on everything they are doing, most especially giving glory to God and not glorifying themselves.
You both are such an encouragement.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Haril, for having us.